Businesses and governments around the world have been adopting hybrid cloud for their digital transformation. As they move essential applications to the cloud itself becomes critical infrastructure. Therefore, the concerns and requirements around data availability and whether they are following the rules and policies in a given jurisdiction become important. This is where the concept of sovereign cloud comes into play. There are three concepts and as outcomes related to sovereign cloud. One is around data sovereignty. Another is around operational sovereignty. And the third is digital sovereignty. When you look at these things, let's think about them and understand them from the perspective of three fictitious companies. Let's imagine there's a company called Privacy Inc. They're worried about their data. Given cyber attacks, ransomware, protecting customer information, consumer information is reputational risk that they need to handle, right? So how do you protect the data and make sure only you have access to the data and you control the keys? So from that perspective, that even a cloud provider should not be able to access the data. That's aspect of privacy. The other aspect is residency, data residency. Is the data stored and processed within the particular region and jurisdiction? How do you make sure that addresses that? That's what this company is concerned about, and that's all about data sovereignty. Fundamentally, when you look at sovereign cloud, data sovereignty is a fundamental and foundational requirement that needs to be addressed, and that's a primary one. Let's go to the second one, operational sovereignty. Let's think about a fictitious company again called Always On Inc., right? Given the importance of these essential and critical applications, they want to make sure the application and the infrastructure is resilient, that it is always on, it's available. Even if there's a disaster that happens in a particular region, can you stay up? That's very important from a disaster recovery, availability perspective, so that you're not dependent on some other infrastructure elsewhere in the world and so on and so forth. The other aspect of the Always On Incorporated is worried about is locality. In terms of infrastructure and people, is it in the region? Is your cloud data centers in the region? Who's managing and accessing them? Do you have transparency around it, right? So that comes in the context of operational sovereignty. The third, when you think of digital sovereignty, let's imagine it in the context of a company called Governit Incorporated. You want to govern who has access, what the policies are, what the rules are, that you apply, that they follow them, right? So in terms of governance, it's an important aspect of digital sovereignty. The other aspect of digital sovereignty is transparency. You need to know what's going on. Can you do pooled audits from a regulations perspective? Can you have visibility to the network flows, right? Having transparency at an infrastructure or operational level becomes important. So those are the three things, three outcomes when it comes to sovereignty and sovereign cloud. And now how do you meet them? You got to remember, one size does not fit all. It's not like you need all of them for every workload. This is where you need to take a risk-based approach, right? Because you are balancing on one side growth, and what are you balancing it with? It's essentially about risk. The most critical applications, most critical information, you may need the highest level of control. But for certain set of workloads and applications, you don't need to apply the same stringent rules, right? So taking a risk-based approach when it comes to balancing your growth and innovation becomes important. So it's fundamentally a choice so that we encourage more of a precision regulation and standards-based approach to governance rules and standards. This way it can be technologically enforced and managed. We talked about the why and the what. We talked about the approach. How do you accomplish it? So in a hybrid cloud world, typically these companies, that fictitious companies we are talking about, or the workloads that you're working on, deals with applications that you're bringing to the cloud, and the data. When it comes to data sovereignty and privacy, make sure your data is encrypted and managed with keys that only you have control over, and the data itself is in your control. We have this notion of keep your own key, right? It's not just bring your own key, you keep it right from hardware, control them, and you have full control, have technical assurance. Technologies like confidential computing come into play. As well as it gets to sensitive PII data, you can do field level encryption, tokenization, and technology approaches of that sort, so that you can actually ensure, be it an object store or databases. And this is even more important as it comes to AI, right? You're dealing with sensitive and confidential data. And your workload protection, so that your workloads are up and running. So when you look at it holistically, taking a data-centric approach is important. Now, once you define these policies and controls, a security team and an officer can say, this is all you need to meet. But a developer is not a security expert. How do you then orchestrate them as policy as code, and where do you deploy them? There are two options you can take, depending on, again, criticality and risk, and based on the region. You can take either a public cloud-based deployment approach, where a region, let's say Frankfurt in EU, right? When you look at cloud providers like IBM Cloud having a presence, you can deploy these workloads, have full control of the data, and deploy them in an infrastructure and a platform layer, like a hybrid cloud platform on top of it, like containers and OpenShift, that gives you ability to have a interoperable, consistent, and standardized hybrid cloud deployment model. You leverage them from a cloud perspective. So that's number one, which is a public cloud model. Public cloud deployment model in a given region. The second option is, as you think about more control, there may be local providers, infrastructure providers that you may trust, or you may want to deploy it in an on-premise data center. This is where the notion of a distributed cloud comes into play. With a distributed cloud, you're essentially distributing your workload and the platform, like OpenShift, into the infrastructure of choice that you have control over. So you make a risk-based decision on whether you want to consume a public cloud model in a given region that meets your requirements, or whether you want to deploy on an infrastructure, right? So between these, as you deploy hybrid cloud model from a cloud, you deploy them and bring them in terms of a remote deployment. This is where a distributed cloud paradigm come into play. You deploy your platform in a distributed manner at an edge, on-prem or a data center. So these are two ways that you can deploy and solution patterns that we have observed. In essence, if you think of data sovereignty, you're thinking about data privacy and residency, so that in a particular region. You're looking at operational sovereignty in terms of locality and resiliency. So based on your deployment model, you can get the resiliency and plan for your disaster recovery and availability zones in a way that you have more design around your resiliency and locality. And not only you deploy it through policy as code, you have to think about continuous monitoring, continuous compliance. So if you're thinking about posture management, compliance, so that you're not just doing check marks every 6 months, you actually have a way to think about in terms of audit reports and continuous monitoring. You can actually achieve governance and transparency through those techniques and technologies. Therefore, with these two approaches on how you can achieve it, where you have full control of the data, deployment model that enables you in terms of locality, and a monitoring and continuous compliance approach around governance, you can actually achieve your outcomes in terms of sovereign cloud through these two solution patterns. Thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more videos like it, please leave a comment below, share your liking, and subscribe. Thank you.